Welcome to The Code, your guide to health and human performance. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Fix from Physio Room, a performance-based rehab facility here in Denver. On this podcast, we're going to explore the key areas of your life that impact your overall health and wellness, from sleep hygiene and stress management to nutrition, movement, relationships, and more. We bring you conversations with industry experts and top performers to share strategies they have for cracking the code on health and human performance. Now let's get to today's show. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Code. Again, I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Fix with Physio Room. And today I'm really excited to be joined by a friend of mine, a client of mine, or a client of ours at Physio Room, Lauren Goldberg. She's a licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, and owner of a practice here in Littleton called Secure Base Mental Health. We're sitting in her office. So thank you so much, Lauren, for being here on The Code and joining me for this episode.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
Yeah, we got an awesome day outside. So the sun is shining. It can't be better this coming up weekend. And I'm excited for people to get to know a little bit about you, get to know a little bit more about mental health. I feel like, it's an area that over the past couple of years, I've started to learn a little bit more about, but I didn't really have, even though a family member of mine is in a very similar professions, niche of the profession as you. It just wasn't really something that I knew much about. So yeah, I'm excited about this.
Cool. Yeah, I think it'd be good for everyone to hear from a therapist, right?
I think so. Lauren, will you just share your background a little bit?
Yeah.
Sort of introduce yourself here on the episode and, tell us where you came from and how you got into what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it's great to be here. I've been listening to the podcast a bit and you guys have done a great job. So yeah, nice work.
Thanks.
So I grew up on the East Coast in right outside DC and went to University of Virginia for college. And I actually started out there doing nursing. So in the nursing school, thinking that I wanted to take care of people in that way. And then kind of quickly realized that I more wanted to talk to people about emotional health and those pieces. So I transferred out of nursing school and became a psych major and connected with, when I was thinking about what I wanted to do after school, I connected with a professor of mine who suggested, based on what I was telling him, that I should maybe look into social work because there's sort of like a broader range of things that you can do with that degree.
Sure.
And I thought that was a great idea. So a friend of mine, Meg, I met her in college and she had always wanted to come out to Denver because her family used to vacation out here all the time. So I decided sight unseen to apply to DU, Graduate School of Social Work. And I got in and told her we were going to Denver. And she looked at me like I was crazy. And here we are. So moved out here and went to DU.
When did you move out here? What?
2007.
2007.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so loved it out here. I met my husband the first week I was out here, my future husband.
Wow.
And we dated for a little while here. And then he went to law school in San Francisco. So I ended up, after I finished my degree, going out there and worked a bit out there where I found kind of a life-changing program that I worked on for a while. And I was doing early childhood mental health consultation. It's kind of a mouthful, but basically I learned a ton about early childhood and early attachment patterns and how they influence how we see ourselves and how we relate to those around us. Had some great mentors and just learned a lot about relationships and community and how it impacts people. And we eventually moved back to Colorado. And I think I kind of realized shortly after that, that kids were not really my passion, but working with adults was, and parlayed my early childhood experience into private practice with adults, where you can basically still use a lot of the knowledge around early attachment patterns to help adults.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I've got 2 kiddos. So after my second kiddo is when I started my private practice.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, so how long have you had, the private practice, secure-based mental health?
I think it's almost 3 years now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I've heard, from chatting with you, maybe like referring a client or two, I've heard nothing but good things about what you're doing here. Now you had a previous office before the one we're sitting in today, right? So
I did. Yeah.
How was the, I guess I'll get to this in a minute, but hearing your background, from the East Coast to Colorado out to the West Coast, then coming back a little bit, you've been across the United States. But so many people do that, right? They they move out here to Colorado, they come out here to visit. I came out here to ski, and 6 months later, I'm moving out there, and I didn't even know anything about Colorado.
Exactly.
Similar thing happened to us. I guess it was less for us of the moving to Colorado because of Colorado. I mean, I wanted to be near the mountains. My wife did too, but it was more for the opportunity with Physio Room, and it was more for the opportunity to be closer to her sister and brother-in-law. Because we were in Kansas City before this, where we had an awesome friend group, just no family there. Right. And it's just different, right? Yeah. Not being near any family.
Yes, it is.
So neither of us are near our parents, but we're by my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I think like you said, you went into the nursing side of things. Yeah. And something that you wanted to do is you wanted to help people, take care of people, care for people. Yeah. And there are a lot of different ways that you can do that. Absolutely. Right. I mean, you may have a realtor might say my passion is helping take care of people, helping them find their home that they're going to raise their family in,
helping them with a vision. Right?
Yeah. Whatever it's going to be. So there's so many different ways that you can do that. But, so many of the people that I talk to every day, that's their driving force behind whatever it is that they're doing, whether they're a physical therapist, a chiropractor, mental health therapist, nurse, doctor, you name it. Yeah. True. But yeah, no, so this is good. So what I'm curious to find is, so you had your first office. Yeah. Then you opened up this one. How was the transition for you? I assume based on, we're sitting here, I assume you were doing a lot of work in person with clients. Yeah. And then in the 3 years that you've had your practice, the pandemic starts and everything goes virtual. How was that kind of transition going from talking to people in person, now doing everything on Zoom or on the phone?
Yeah. So I don't do everything on Zoom on the phone right now. So there was a period where, just like everyone, I was pivoting with society as we learned more and as we gained an understanding of what the beast of COVID-19 was. So, there was a time where I moved a lot of people to virtual. Mm-hmm. But those that didn't feel super connected virtually, I would still see them in person with masks. Yeah. And now it's nice because we are not doing masks. We are doing in person. I've got my trusty air purifier there, but just trusting that we're kind of in a different place. And, my work, my approach as a therapist tends to work better in person. Mm-hmm. So it's been nice to kind of just return to normal.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, we found ourselves in the situation where we did a couple of virtual appointments, but for the most part, we were working with clients in person with masks the whole time. And even though, we're putting our hands on clients a lot more in the office to do manual techniques and things, it's just different, right? It's just different being in person, reading the body language, not being distracted by the technology and, your phone, you're trying to sit on a Zoom call. Yep. And I know that was something that my grandmother, who's in the same field as you, something that she was really having a hard time with. She did not want to do it, but she wanted to make sure, she was taking care of her own health too, because she's a little older. She's in great health, but she was talking with a lot of her clients on the phone because at her office, she didn't have, the full-fledged internet and everything set up, because she was like, I don't need it. She takes notes, pen to paper, and she does not have Wi-Fi in the office. So I know that was something that as soon as she was able to feel comfortable enough getting back in person, she absolutely was doing that because it was just better
nice
for her clients.
Yeah, it's nice. And there are interruptions in virtual. I mean, there's a lot you can do. I'm doing a somatic experiencing training, which is part of my approach, which you can get to later. But we're doing that entirely virtually, and it's a body-based approach. So there's a lot you can do, but yeah, I think people just tend to prefer in person.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's totally how my personality and everything is.
Yeah.
Well, you started to mention a little bit, Lauren, about your training. You obviously talked about school, going to UVA, going to DU, but then you had mentioned the early childhood attachment training that you were doing, and you've started to blend that or carry that forward into your work with adults now. So sort of like walk me through that process of like, how has that been? What is some of the other like, training that you've done that you utilize on a daily basis working with clients now?
Yeah. So as a therapist, one thing that's super cool is that our personal work really is very congruent with our work with clients. So I can use my own like self-exploration to become a better tool for my clients. And so I'll break that down a little bit. I finally found a therapist that I resonated with when I moved to Colorado for the second time. And I had been through therapy in the past, more of kind of a cognitive based, what we call like CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. So you're doing a lot of thinking about your cognition and your behavior and trying to shift things based on thinking your way through it. And there's something about that, especially when you have anxiety or depression, that just doesn't always resonate with people. And there's a really good reason why. So this therapist that I found here, she worked, she had training in what we call somatic experiencing therapy. And so it's a technique that brings curiosity about the nervous system.
Okay.
And we get really curious with clients about what's happening in their bodies. And we invite a connection between mind and body that is not there in a lot of other types of therapy. So when I started my work with her, it was like just a total game changer in terms of how I understood my own anxiety and my own upbringing and how it was impacting me now. And that started the ball rolling for me gaining more training in that particular technique, continuing to work with her and other practitioners, as we call them, in SE, and just continuing that work on myself as I also bring that to clients. So if I don't have an understanding of what's going on in my body with my nervous system, it is much harder for me to sit with a client and be able to attune to them and understand what's going on for them. To understand what's mine versus theirs, right? So if I'm feeling a certain thing in session, it's really helpful for me to have a lot of clarity around that. And to sort of name it with them and say, here's what I'm noticing. Are you noticing that too? Or is that just me? And it brings a lot of connection between mind and body, which is something that's very much missing from like traditional therapy.
Yeah, no. And I resonate really strongly with what you just said. We work with a lot of clients right now who, maybe they're business owners or entrepreneurs of some sort, intrapreneurs. And one thing that I really believe is true is like, your business growth is only going to go as far as your personal growth.
Oh, yeah,
right.
Totally.
Like if you're not doing self-development, personal growth type of work, it's going to hold you back in any other venture that's out there. And that's basically like what you're talking about, just with a slightly different spin on things of your own personal growth is helping you with your clients.
Oh yeah. And it's particularly true with therapists because I hear a lot from people, that, oh, well, my friend who's a therapist just has an awful relationship. Right. And, or, doesn't have a great sense. I think it's like, if you're trained as a therapist in terms of schooling, but you don't continue to do your own work. It's like just enough weapon to think that you know what you're doing and then harming people as a result of not doing your own work. Because the therapeutic relationship is the biggest tool that we have. Establishing safety, using the therapist-client relationship as a template for healthy interaction and healthy relationships. Having healthy boundaries, allowing people to feel safe enough to get curious enough to do the work that leads to change. So it's super important that I'm clear about what's happening for me so that I can be present for clients.
Absolutely. You know, I think it's the same thing in any sort of health field, right? Or really probably any field. I feel the same way. I think providers in physical therapy or rehab who don't continue to, I mean, you're required to do, and I'm going to put air quotes on this, right? Like continuing education, but how invested and actually intentional you are and present you are in that continuing education is what's going to determine, do you actually change how you practice? There are a lot of people that go to all sorts of continuing education, but it doesn't actually change what they do on a day-to-day basis. And there are people that have gone to school, 20, 30 years ago, and they're working as a provider, but they're doing stuff that is so outdated that it's really, I mean, I guess it's helping people if they're doing a good job with the communication and the relationship, but it's really not helping them from like the techniques that are being used. They're very outdated, right? It's not what we know is going to get people better and well, the most efficient way that we know, like the knowledge we have today. So I think that's huge.
Yeah. And I'm kind of like, I think it's why I'm good at what I do is because I am constantly wanting to learn. I've just always been that way, but I am doing like a 3-year Somatic Experiencing the certification program, even though I've been using the modality for a while, getting officially certified. You have to gain hours in that, personal and professional hours in that. And then I already kind of know what training I'm doing next. That's going to cost me thousands of dollars. But that's just the way that I am. And I love it. I love to be able to provide the best possible modality and information to my clients. The other thing that I do is I work with several mentors who I meet with several times a month. So I'm constantly reflecting on my own work with clients and continuing my growth. So like you said, just actually doing the work.
Yeah, I love it. And it's not always easy work, right? It's it's very difficult. It's a huge investment of dollars and time. It causes you to have to prioritize other things, right? You can't pursue other things because of the investment you're putting here with time and money. And it's uncomfortable, because in order to actually see those improvements, you got to push yourself outside of your comfort zone or gain awareness of how you feel a certain way, why you feel a certain way.
Absolutely.
To try to wrap your head around and understand it.
Yeah.
But I love the word that you kept using, curious, or having curiosity. That's something we do with clients too, of like, once we feel like we've established some trust with the person we're working with, there are a lot of different ways that we could do some sort of intervention or treatment with this person. And we don't exactly know until we do it, how it's going to turn out. So I use that word all the time, with a client, like, hey, so-and-so, I'm curious if we try this, how you will respond to it. How does that sound to you? And they're like, great, let's do it. Because we need to figure out how you're going to respond. Yeah.
And I think that's probably another thing it is another thing that I work into with my clients. And the other piece of just knowing myself well enough to be able to trust my instinct and even say to the client, hey, I'm not totally sure about this, but here's what I'm thinking, or, tell me if I'm wrong, but this is what I'm noticing. So you're taking some risks, right? Some calculated risks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, hearing this conversation kind of gets me thinking of a question for you, which I don't know if this will be an easy question to answer, but through your own sort of personal growth journey, being, not only the therapist, but being a client and working with therapists to improve your own self. What are some like major things or major hurdles that you found yourself kind of overcoming that probably is helping your clients on a daily basis? And the reason I want to ask you that is because I bet you there are so many people either listening to this or not that probably are going through the exact same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. Personal hurdles. Well, I think so. I've been at this a long time, and at this, I mean, doing my own personal work as a therapist, as a human.
Yeah.
And working through some definite anxiety and what we call kind of nervous system dysregulation, right? Where what happens in my system is not super congruent with the environment at times. So I'm sort of at like a hyper vigilant place in terms of how I see the world with certain things. And so, I mean, that's a huge thing that I continue to work on with my own somatic experiencing practitioner, and how it relates to early attachment patterns for me. And but I think, I've been at it for like 10 plus years.
Yeah.
Continue to find practitioners who are meeting me where I'm at right now with my own healing.
Right.
But what has become really clear to me at this time, which I feel like everybody should hear, is that there's not always, like, we expect there to be this beginning, middle, and resolution to what we are going through. And there isn't always. What it often is we're dealing with something, and then the resolution is actually how to be with it in a different way. And so instead of getting rid of my anxiety entirely, how do I integrate it in a way that feels like it's manageable and useful to me? And I think that that's what my therapists, practitioners, mentors have helped me with. And what I hope to be helping clients with is this understanding that Lauren, you're never going to be at a place where you're not anxious, but you can orient to it in a different way so that it actually can help you or inform you. There are great gifts with that, right? And I think for me, because I tend to catastrophize or worry, I also see gratitude in a different way. So I'm actually able to open my heart to, like, I'm so grateful that the thing I worried about isn't true. And there's an ability to, like, pendulate between the two, to pendulate into, like, that activation of this is really hard. And then that deactivation of, oh my goodness, like, let me just, like, revel in the joy of feeling really good today and really positive. And how is that so different from where I was? And that's the capacity building that people build in using a modality like somatic experiencing, where you're actually looking at the nervous system. What you're doing is you're building capacity to notice positive in a world where you've oriented towards negative. Yeah. And so that's been a huge thing for me, is like, I now understand that I'm not working towards not ever feeling anxious. I'm working towards how to relate to it different and move in the here and now and forward.
Yeah, I love that. And I love where you ended up going with that answer, because I think that is totally true. And, being somebody myself who's, like, very type A, or, like, getting stuff done, or, like, I've got my to-do list here. I love checking things off, right? It's easy sometimes to think, like, I just need to get to the end, right? There's this point that I need to get to, but the point is not where the improvement, it's all in the journey, right? Absolutely. Like, in the journey or the experience, is where the magic happens, if you want to say that. But I think that's, like, really cool for people to hear. And how boring would it be, right? Like, you're different than other people. You're different than me. People have different amounts of anxiety or whatever. How boring would it be if we're all the exact same?
Oh my God. Well, and how terrible, because if my husband were like I am, we'd be a complete disaster.
Yeah. So I think it's awesome. And that's part of what's cool about, having so many different people out there, is some people are going to worry about things a certain way. Yeah. Some are not. Yeah. Some are going to get more excited than others about a certain thing. And that's what makes it fun. And totally. Just having that difference.
Yes.
No. So that kind of brings me to another question. And maybe that is, maybe anxiety is maybe one of the answers, that you just started to touch on. But like, I feel like until you really start to communicate with somebody like yourself and start to learn about what mental health therapy is and is not, and if you don't already have some form of personal or familial experience with it, I feel like people don't really have a good sense of like, what is mental health therapy?
Gosh, yeah.
Like, what does a social work professional do?
Right.
So, and I know from you and I were talking off of air, it's not what we often see on television or, on the internet or something. So there sometimes seems to be like a little stigma, right, around that.
Yeah.
So what I would love is for you to like kind of demystify that a little bit and just sort of talk about like what actually is the process of working with a mental health professional.
Yeah, such a good question. And yes, TV and movies just totally butcher it. And I think that they've gotten a little bit better, but I can't say it's great. But what it is not is someone sitting on a chair with a clipboard judging you and asking you like, and shaming you. There's so much shame, I feel like, built into like therapists, as on TV and movies. So what it should be is someone who can build on your time, safety, and rapport, and allow you to feel safe enough to be curious about your own experience and be sort of guided to your own understanding of your experience and to making changes. So what I don't do is tell people what they should do. Like, I don't give advice. It's a very open-ended sort of dialogue. I do a lot of educating, particularly about the nervous system. But I think for any good therapist, you're doing a lot of educating about why one is now doing things the way that they're doing based on their history, and based on their ideas and orientation to the world, so that they don't feel so bad about what's going on for them. They don't feel so much shame. So that's a huge part of my job is destigmatizing, taking shame away, helping people feel empowered where they are, and getting curious about what's going on cognitively and in their body.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think some of that stigma, and I probably was someone who used to feel this way. I don't anymore. As I've gotten educated and learned more, I think a lot of times my perception is that people feel like something has to be wrong with them. Right. And that's why they have to go do mental health therapy. Right. But that's not the case.
No, it's not. No, I mean, I get a lot of inquiries where, I talked to someone yesterday who said like, I really just want this as a tool to continue to explore myself. Great. Awesome. I can help you with that. But I will say, oftentimes what is happening, 100% of the time, what's happening in therapy is usually a reparenting process. So I'm acting as a caregiver that is the name of my company, Secure Base, where people can come to me and explore what's going on, be safe enough to do that, go out into the world and come back and explore even more.
Yeah. I love that. And you said the same thing that I kind of will tell clients as well, is you're helping to guide them through a journey that is not yours, it's theirs, right?
Yes.
When clients come into our office or any physical therapist office for this matter, a lot of times what they think, and maybe that's because of what they've been told by some other provider that referred them over, is like, you're going to go here so that they can fix this problem for you. And that is not what we can do, right? I cannot just tell you what to do and it's just going to fix the problem. Because if I could, I'd only ever be able to see people one time. I would fix their problems. I'd probably charge like $10,000 for that because, it's not a magic pill, right? We're there to guide you through your own experience and your journey and provide you with the tools that you need continue to manage this. Yes. Right. So
yeah, I get a lot of, and I think that's a other good point in terms of what I'd like people to know is, let's say, for example, because this is just like kind of the epitome, that's just sort of a stereotypical example, is like someone who is involved with an abusive partner. Sure. Right. And they come in and they're not ready to leave. Right. And so it's not on me to get them to leave, but it is on me to create a space for them to continue to reflect on why they're maybe not leaving, and use our relationship as, again, that healthy template to help build them up to a place where they start to understand themselves better and understand, oh yeah, I actually don't need to be treated like this, and they can leave on their own time. But I'm never, I see in people's faces a lot when they say like, yeah, he's cheated on me like a lot. And like, I know I should leave, and it's no. So for me, it's how do we sit in that stuckness and be with it and say, yeah, gosh, you should leave, but it's hard to think about actually doing that. Yeah. You're not ready. So let's be with that. Right. And let's think about, how hard that is, and really just kind of be with them in it as they do their own work to eventually, hopefully leave. Yeah. 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 You're just kind of like,
calling it like it is. Yeah. It's not right or wrong or good or bad. It's just, it is. Yeah. It's where you're at. It's not your fault. Right. And let's see what we can do about that. Right.
Yeah. And let's stop, shaming yourself, because chances are it's because of your own upbringing that you're dealing with someone who is a narcissist, and you really need to be built up and figure out who you are and differentiate from that narcissist before you can actually leave. Yeah. And feel empowered enough to do that.
Yeah. I've read a couple books, and what kind of this is reminding me of is, nobody can fault you for how you feel about a certain situation. Yeah. Right. Because it's not like you're saying, one comment or the other. You're just saying like, hey, this is how I feel. Yeah. And you don't have to apologize for that. Right. Like, it's nobody's fault. It's just, this is just what I'm feeling. Yeah. And it just is what it is. So I think that's huge. So I think that's awesome. Like starting to demystify that stigma of like, something doesn't have to be wrong with you to work through mental health things. I like to approach it kind of from like hey, this is just where I'm at now, and I want to further optimize how I'm performing from a mental standpoint, right. Or I want like to reach a higher peak performance type of situation. And I'm starting to see with, other people that I know, or, seeing things in the media, I'm starting to see that become a little bit more of a trend of where there are like people who are totally normal, right? Just like everyone else, but like what anyone from the outside looking in would see as like, wow, you're a very successful person, but they're participating in mental health work with a therapist because they just want that next level.
Well, yeah. And also there's different levels of success, right? Yeah, so totally. I see a lot of high functioning. I mean, I think like great client for me actually is like a high achieving, high functioning person who has a lot of success in their career, but who's struggling in relationships. And that's usually because there's a reason that they're so successful with their work, right? They've gained a lot of reinforcement for that in the past. That's been sort of their survival circuit in terms of, okay, if I perform this way, then maybe I'll be good enough for so-and-so. And it's sort of a way to disconnect and survive the situation that they're in. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to be successful. And that's, I think I hear that a lot from clients. It's like, I'm so good at my job, but I just can't hold a relationship together. Like what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. And you see that a lot, right? Where I've gone through some of that, where when you like really pour into certain areas of your life, sometimes it leaves other areas of your life kind of lagging behind. Because it's hard to have like an equal balance in all different areas at the same time. How have you, maybe helped clients, or like, how have you helped people work through that sort of struggle, this struggle of like, trying to have balance in what you're doing, like kind of what you're talking about, where there are a lot of people I know who are like really successful either in work or in athletics or fitness or something. And then you see other people who maybe like, they don't really participate in that at all, but they have really awesome relationships and they're really close with other people.
Yeah.
Like finding balance seems to be a challenge that a lot of people struggle with. And I definitely don't know the answer, but maybe I'm asking for myself. How do you help find some balance? What are some like tips or strategies that maybe would
so
be
I
useful?
think, it's a good question. I think, for one, I follow the client's lead in terms of what they're saying is something they're wanting, right? So if I, someone comes in and they're not where they want to be in their career, but they're not really mentioning it, I'm not going to go that direction. But if it's, I don't know, like a kind of a typical example is like someone who works a lot and their relationships are suffering, right? So how do we understand that desire to work a lot, right? And this is going to be different for every client, but how do we understand that? How do we make sense of it? And how do we decrease the shame of that? Okay. So looking back at early childhood, you got a lot of connection from your parents around working a lot, right? You got a lot of kudos, you got a lot of reinforcement, maybe in a family system where they didn't see you otherwise, right? So this was your thing. I'm the one that is good at school, right? And that just keeps going. So the things that are our biggest, like greatest assets can also be our biggest challenges when we get to a certain level, where all of a sudden we're like, oh, wait a minute. I haven't really figured out how to be present for myself and for my family. And so why is that? And how do I then take a look at that and figure out how to get the balance back? And a lot of that is like, that's a sort of, again, it's sort of a typical thing for people that work a lot is there's a way, not always, but there can be a way of kind of disconnecting from emotions by pouring yourself into that and staying in that survival state of lots of sympathetic arousal and keeping yourself at that level so you don't have to drop in and feel so much. And when you're not feeling, you can't connect to those around you. So.
Yeah, I love that. It's not like, why are you not doing this one thing? Spending time with your family, building relationships, whatever that is. But like, why? What's pulling you the other direction? It's not that you don't want to do those things, but like, for other reasons, you're being pulled in another direction.
And what I try to do is help people understand that is a way that you keep yourself safe. That's not a bad thing. You're not a horrible person. This is how you've learned to keep yourself safe, is by not dropping into how you feel and not trusting people, right? People, emotions, they don't really serve me. They haven't served me because for me, I was abandoned. I'm not talking about me, but just in general, like emotions are not necessary because they didn't help me when I had them as a kid. No one really paid attention. So I'm going to just leave that there. I'm going to go into my career. And then, oops, I realize all of a sudden I'm at a certain place and I actually do want that connection. And how the heck do I get it?
Yeah. And I think, people don't necessarily know the answer, and you got to do a lot of that curiosity and exploring to figure that out. So the word that comes to mind as like what you're talking about is like vulnerability, right? Like, and vulnerability is oftentimes very uncomfortable for a lot of people. And I think for many people, if they were considering working with someone in the mental health field, there has to be a bit of vulnerability to even lead them to the point where they're going to seek out you said not advice, but like seek out the assistance of working with somebody. How have you seen, by the time they get to your office, they've already crossed that hurdle, but like, what would you say to somebody who, maybe they're considering doing work with mental health, but what they're struggling with is like asking someone, feeling of asking someone for help. Because sometimes asking someone for help is uncomfortable. Like you feel like, I can't do this on my own. I have to be very vulnerable to ask someone to help me.
So it mimics, when I see clients in here, it mimics how they are on the outside, right? So if it's hard for someone to show up here and ask for help, that tells me a lot about what's going on for them outside. And so it's similar to what I was just saying is, someone who has learned they cannot rely on other people, they're going to have a hard time reaching out to a therapist and feeling like it's safe enough to be authentically themselves with a therapist. It's my job to decrease a lot of that anxiety and to meet them where they're at. Right. And I think the most beautiful thing that I've heard clients say time and time again, which is how I know I'm doing my job, is I didn't want to come today.
Mm-hmm. But they did. Yeah.
And, and just honoring that and honoring the resistance. You always need to honor the resistance. What we resist persists. And so if we're not honoring where they're at in their journey, yeah, totally. You didn't want to come today. Of course. Yeah. Why would you? You don't know me. Like, I'm a trained professional, but how do you know how safe I am? There's a lot of trained professionals out there. So just honoring, acknowledging, validating, the first time I talk to them, how do I just sort of meet them where they're at, understand their resistance, understand their anxiety, and just be a human.
Yeah. 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 We use the AAA acronym a lot in our office, like acknowledge, ask, and allow. Mm-hmm. Like acknowledge whatever the concern or issue was that the person brought up. Like make sure you acknowledge that and not just like brush it by the side. Don't act like you know how they feel. You might not know how they feel. And then ask them a question and allow them the time and the space to share their story and share their experience.
I love that.
And it's basically like what you're saying in different
And this
terms.
is why I love to send people to you guys because, you guys do such a great job of like literally dropping in with someone, and just following, like you said, if you could fix it in one session, you charge $10,000 and never see him again. I always come to Amber with new stuff. Yep. And every time she responds and she listens and she treats it like that's the most important thing in the room. And that's what you need to do. And so. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, and that's going to look different on any given day. Right. Because, so much stuff happens from one session to the next. And what I tell people is like,
life.
Exactly. What we hope is that, this is where you are today, and this is where we're going to want to be. And what would be amazing is if this trajectory of improvement was just this nice straight line that improves one day over another day, just like a staircase. But that's not how it goes, right? Really? There's going to be ups and there's going to be downs.
Yes.
And what we hope is that your down days in the future are better than your up days in the past.
Absolutely. That's exactly, that is life. So throughout, and this is what I try to, help clients understand, is throughout any given hour, you're going to have ups and downs and ups and downs, and throughout any given day, week, month, and just like anything, healing, just like physical healing, it is this, and I'm doing this thing with my hand where I'm kind of up and down. That is life. And that is the process of healing as well. And the idea is, like you said, to spend more time at the top, less time at the bottom, and have it be this nice little curve rather than a lot of these like, kind of staggering moments where you're stuck up here, stuck down there. And there's always something new on the horizon, right? Like if we could see, like I always tell clients, they come in and they're like, I feel like I was doing good and now I'm doing, and it's like, oh, cool. You're able to notice that. That last week you were doing great. And right now, not so much. So let's just be with that. And then understand that therapy, like anything else, is a nice, like, you get to the top of the hill and then you're able to kind of spend some time there. And then you see the next hill that you need to climb. Because if you saw it all at once, you would never even start.
That's right. You just got to take it one step at a time. And that's what I like to see clients, right, on their good days and on their not so good days, because then we can work through that, because it's a different challenge that they're going through, right? On the good days, we get to explore how much are we able to push? Like, what is the capacity that you actually can start to do as we're working through this injury? Like, how much can you do? And then on the not so good days, when maybe they're feeling flared up, we get to teach them like, hey, how can we make this little flare up shorter lived than what they used to be in the past? Exactly. Like, how do we get through this a little bit more quickly, efficiently, so that we can get back to those good days?
Yeah. And, and I think too, like you were saying, how, why do you reach out to a therapist? How do you, something doesn't have to be terribly wrong. I always tell people, like, when you're not in a crisis, it's like the best time to be in therapy, because we can really explore. You have the capacity to explore some deeper things, right? So it's not like, oh, I don't know what to talk about today. Like, come in and be yourself. This is a relationship, and be as you are, and come in and sit down. If you don't have anything to say, we don't say anything for a while. If you want to, talk about the weather. That's what we do. But giving that, like, once that crisis has kind of released, there's so much work that can be done. Usually that client leaves and was like, I didn't know what I was going to talk about today, but here we just explored so many things. Yeah.
And a lot of times I was telling this to a group of people this morning, that from a physical therapy standpoint, you don't have to wait until you're in pain to come in and work with me or anyone else, right? Like I would actually prefer you work with someone else on our team, because I'm so confident that you're going to get so well taken care of that like it makes my job easy to, like, when I'm talking to people outside the office, it's like, I don't have to worry about if their schedule is not going to confine to mine. Like, it doesn't matter. As long as you see anyone on our team, you're going to be so well taken care of. But you don't have to be in pain to benefit from it.
No.
Anyone could walk in the office and we're going to be able to do an assessment and we're going to find things that we can work on. Right. And 100%. Even if they're like performing optimally, and this has never happened, knock on wood, but there's going to be something that we find that's not working optimally that we can improve. But even if like this person just tests out amazing, they're performing great, well, then we just work on performance, right? Like then we just work on building capacity, working on resilience, and like just make you better than you were yesterday.
Because that coming up and coming down, the coming up and coming down is what builds resiliency. And that's what we want to build in therapy. That's what we want to build in PT is, you know, being able to recognize when you were activated and then come back down. That in and of itself builds that resiliency. There's such an overlap, which is cool, between what we do. You know, it's not like you're just working on the mind and we're just working on the body. There's a huge overlap in the middle. There's this huge gray area. I work a lot with chronic pain, and you know, that's it's a huge mental health component to that. So
absolutely. So say somebody they're just not quite sure, right? If they want to cross that hurdle to actually begin working with somebody, but they know they would like to start to find out a little bit more information. They're like, all right, I'm kind of buying into this. I want to explore this just a little bit. I love to read books. What are some books that maybe you have recommended to people or that you've read yourself that you really hit home that maybe you would suggest somebody check out?
So it depends on, you know, what you're looking for. I really love Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And it's kind of ridiculous
Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Let me write that down.
But so that's kind of a catch-all for people who feel like maybe their childhood wasn't so like they didn't really get what they needed from their parents. And not because their parents are horrible people, but because their parents only can give what they got themselves. And so there's a lot of great themes in that book, a lot of great information, a lot of like normalizing certain things in a family system where you feel like, you know, I just didn't get what I emotionally needed from my parents. And you're kind of going to see, it's a very short read, but it's really great. And it's really helped a lot of my clients. I'd say The Body Keeps the Score.
I have heard great things about that
Bessel van der Kolk. And then any of Peter Levine's books, Waking the Tiger, In an Unspoken Voice. You're going to learn a lot about the mind-body connection and survival energy and how that contributes to mental health.
Awesome. No, I think that's great because everyone's going to be at a little different point in their journey. Right. And we want to be able to help people meet them where they're at and help them move forward from there.
Also name too, The Boundary Boss is a great book too. Talking about boundaries. And if you're kind of like, well, what are boundaries and why do I need them? And how does this resonate in my life? Check that book out. She does a great job of kind of breaking it down, helping you understand why it's important, naming some of like the very typical boundary, diffuse and too rigid boundary symptoms. So that's another good one.
This has been good, Lauren. I guess one, sort of as we move towards closing this episode, I guess one more question for you, just like, is there anything that maybe we haven't touched on yet, a question that I didn't ask you that maybe you were hoping to like share some insight on, or just like anything else that we didn't really touch on that you think would be really important to cover before we wind up here this morning.
Yeah. So two things. One, if you've tried therapy before and it just did not feel like a good fit, please try again. It is truly like dating. You have to figure out who's a good fit for you and why not. If typical talk therapy has only gotten you so far, like I hear it, does for a lot of people, see if you can search for someone who has, a somatic approach. So whether it's like somatic experiencing approach or somatic, I don't know what else they call it, somatic psychology, or kind of a somatic, like body-based approach that brings in that component, I think you'll go a lot farther. Also, don't be afraid to reach out to a therapist and just I've had some really great conversations with people that are they have a lot of great questions for me. Like, what's your approach? What does a typical session look like? How often would you want to see me? What sets you apart? Don't be afraid to again, it's kind of like dating, where you reach out to someone, you talk to them, you figure out, I don't want that, or I do want this. And then maybe that's not a great fit, but you learn about someone else who may be even better fit. And I hate to say this to like the world of who's going to listen to this podcast, but I'm happy to help anyone find a therapist, because it's so hard. I mean, I just was on the phone with someone this morning, like searching for a therapist for my friend, because it's very hard to know what kind of therapist you need if you don't know much about it. Yeah. So
I'm glad that I asked you that question, because some of the things that you addressed were questions that I wasn't planning on asking you. Like for example, what does a session look like? How many sessions do I need to come, type of thing? Because I know those answers are very individualized to whatever the situation and the person is. Yeah. So I'm glad that I asked you that. And what you said, it's totally true. It's true. It's true for physical therapy. Right. We meet a lot of clients that have gone to physical therapy other places, or chiropractic care other places, and they were very skeptical to come into our office because they're like, well, I've already tried this. Yeah. It doesn't work for me. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just give it a try. Right. Yeah. And if you hate it, we will give you your money back and we'll let you walk out of here. Yeah. And the other way, we are not the right fit for every single person that walks into our office. Right. And it would be foolish of us to think that we were. Yes. And so I love that, like basically what you just said of like, you're not going to always be the right fit for someone. No. But at the end of the day, that comes back to like your passion of why you got into this in the first place, is to help people, help take care of people. And even if that means it's not you. Totally. Right. Yes. And I have a huge, I keep lots of lists of people that I refer to, because I have my little community of people, and physio room's part of that. And, I told someone the other day, she's like, I've been to physical therapy. I'm like, you haven't been to physio room yet though. So check them out. So I mean, definitely it's just get out there, ask around, go to Facebook and ask who people have had good experiences with. And it's that's definitely a passion of mine, is finding people help. Well, so. I love your suggestion to reach out to on Facebook or whatever, these different word of mouth pages and things, because for whatever reason, one thing that we all tend to do is, because then we can not have a personal connection to it, is we trust the recommendations of strangers so much, right? Yes, we do. Because then you don't know anything about that person. They're just giving you a recommendation like, hey, this worked really well for me. Yeah. A lot of times, even more than we trust the recommendations of our friend and family. Yes. That's why Google reviews and all these things are so important. Yes. So say somebody wanted to do that, Lauren, and they wanted to reach out to you. Where can people find you? How can they get a hold of you? Yeah. So securebasementalhealth.com or securebasementalhealth@gmail.com, or you can give me a ring, 720-513-3530. Awesome. Yeah. I love when someone rattles off a phone number and they're like, is this, do I remember the phone number? You saw my face. Because now, we all have our iPhones or our Androids or whatever you have, and you just scroll through your list and you hit the name. Yeah. The only phone numbers that I really have memorized, with the exception of my wife and my work, the two people that I've met, since I've had a more traditional modern day phone, are the ones when we didn't have all that. Like when you actually had to call people. Yeah.
Or like
I can still rattle off my parents and my sister, my brother's numbers because I didn't have the ability to just hit their name in my phone.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on here. I think we could have kept talking for, another hour or whatever all day. But that would have been a really long episode. So I appreciate you being on here. Again, guys, we're just wrapping up talking with Lauren Goldberg, the owner of Secure Base Mental Health here in Denver, Littleton, Colorado. Yeah. And we appreciate you being on this episode of The Code, listening to this, and we hope you're able to find some value in every single one of these episodes. And we hope to see you back here next time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.